Okay then. Looks like I'm live. Whoop-de-doo. Let's look at what I've got here. Alright, looks like the stream's kind of getting going a bit. Little weird technical difficulties today. Nothing new, nothing too exciting. I just kind of got a wild hair to come on here and show you all and share with you all some of my zines, or just like small little booklets I've picked up over the years and held on to. I don't have many. I will say that I really don't have many zines. So if anybody would like to, suggest any for me, if you're like a zine reader, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're watching this on catch up, you can always email me if you have a suggestion, because I find something really, there's a lot of spirit in memes, not memes, in zines and in memes and in memes. Yeah, there's just a lot of really good, it's a way to get out your perspective. And when I was a teenager, I found zines really cool, and it's been something that's kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I haven't been collecting or looking into them much in the past few years. Some of the places I used to go for zines no longer exist, and I don't really like going to kind of larger leftist gatherings just because safety issues for one. I am out about my views, and while I don't think I'm a pariah of a person, I really don't want to be in conflict. If I can avoid it, I would prefer to. I have enough crap. So anyway, there that was a long spiel. I'm trying to figure out where I want to start with you. Yeah. The first thing I got here is not actually a zine. So it's kind of a publication. As many of you know, I used to be in the group Radical Women, and even though I have political differences, it was an important time in my life because I learned a lot of skills and I got a lot of knowledge. So this one is a document that they put out. They had a lot of interesting documents, I will say, and they were a second wave organization that managed to last for a long time. And I know they still have chapters around, but anyway, yeah, so they have a lot of interesting insight in politics. And this one, I haven't read it in a long time, but I'm pretty sure I would still agree with a lot of what's in here. So it's called Women's Leader, Double Jeopardy on Account of Sex. It's by Clara Fraser, who was one of the founders of this organization. And this is actually professionally printed. They have their own publisher, so you can kind of see from the quality of it. But it is also something that wouldn't be too hard to produce. So these are a great little way to get out information, about your different views. Anyway, let's see. The contents are interesting. Double jeopardy on account of sex. So this is as a leader, you're already a target, but being female is gonna make you doubly a target. We aren't leaders because we aren't yet equal. So she's addressing the ideas that women can't be leaders, and this whole organization was founded to help train women to be leaders, which I think is part of why I have some of the abilities that I do, just because I was trained to have confidence in myself. The woman leader as a social abnormality. Okay, so how being a leader, sticking out, can make you appear very abnormal to others, and a lot of times people don't get you. The woman leader as political radical, so like dealing with like not only having to deal with all of this other baggage being a leader, but then like being a radical on top of it, and like what challenges come into that. So actually I want to look at that because that's been coming up in my life recently. This is so fucking problematic, I'm not even gonna read it out loud. I mean, I think it's important to like read these things. I'm just like looking at this and I'm just like kind of shocked, like, and that they're still like, I mean, I'm sure people reading this would be like really offended nowadays just at like some of the language. The first sentence is has the N-word in it. So Clara Fraser was not a black woman, so this wasn't like some kind of, reclamation. So that's in and of itself something that like is a problem. And like, I think at times it's been like more socially acceptable to write and like speak in this way, but like, I've just seen over the years that how like there's certain things that we just don't have to like, I think there's an importance in like writing passionately and like writing fiercely, but like, yeah, I also, and like being like really severe in your language too, but like, let me continue on. So I'm not going to read the first bit. Woman is the lowest item on the social totem pole. The political alternatives for her are consequently polarized. Because of the integral relation between women's rights, monogamy, and private property, the movement for women's emancipation is an equivalent to and a corollary of the class struggle. Woman is either part of or ideologically and spiritually aligned with the proletariat. Life forces her to the left or into the far right. The logical extension of the feminine mystique is fascism. Kinder, Kirsch, Kutsch. I don't speak German, so just be aware of that. Which explains the large numbers of middle-class women in the John Birch Society, anti-abortion, and fascinating womanhood groups, both church-inspired, and anti-ERA formations corporate-financed. But the woman in the feminist movement turns left, for Marxist philosophy corresponds to her actual objective place in the sun, outside, underneath, and seething. So one thing I will say about this, they're a socialist feminist group, so that's part of like why she kind of is going into that, the kind of how she puts things together, in terms of like seeing women as like naturally aligned with the proletariat. I mean, we are the proletariat mostly, Some women aren't, but a lot of us are. And I think she saw that too. I mean, she was, but it's also the like the difference would be kind of like the deference to Marx. I mean, I do have that, like, I've studied Marx, so I understand like why it's important to sometimes like go into and talk about that. But I think like one thing that's been liberating for me about radical feminism is my ability to just not care what men have to say, and like to understand that like ultimately like their ideas only go so far. Like we as women have a responsibility not to defer to them, but to like think for ourselves. and to think and listen to what one another think. So I'll read one more paragraph. The woman leader accordingly tends to become a political radical. And if straight political life is one of routine jeopardy, radical politics is jeopardy compounded. She is not only a female liber, she's a goddamn commie who refuses to go back where she didn't come from. She exults in taking on the power structure and the populace with a multi-issue, revolutionary, double-barreled blast. So yeah, that's one that I found here. This is part of the fun of like cleaning your house, is like, or organizing. Not so much cleaning my house, but like going through stuff and like moving things around and kind of putting things in order, like I've been talking about. I get to find stuff like this. Okay, so the next one I want to show you and to talk about is like, this is a really cool zine. I'd like to get more copies of it actually. Figure 8, issue number 3. The most revolutionary thing you can do is to love your body. Fat liberation now. So this issue has some interesting things in it. So just on the cover, I'll talk about what's on the cover. There's an interview with Marilyn Wan, yoga for big bodies. So she talks about like doing yoga as like a fat woman, fat ass cheerleaders. So like an actual like group of fat cheerleaders that she's a part of, which is like an exciting thing. Obesity epidemic myths, health at every size, and more. And I think this is like, I really appreciate having this because I think culturally it's like really, it's still really acceptable, even though we live in an era of like, you know, body positivity, quote unquote, to marginalize fat people and specifically fat women, and to also like continue to perpetrate a lot of myths and stereotypes and also like just negative dieting cultures. Like every time I'm in a group of women, inevitably, like more than 5, the conversation starts going to fucking diet. And sometimes even less than that. The level to with which dieting plagues women's consciousness is like so pervasive, and I fucking hate it. So works like this I think are really important, and I, you know, I've gotten a lot out of them. So let's see. Oh yeah, Marilyn Wan is the woman who wrote the book Fatso, which I should probably try to get a copy of at some point because it's an essential. We might even like, if I could find a PDF of it, maybe we could do like we could do that. Like, I think that might be good. Yeah, I don't really want to look at or read the interview as such because I don't think it's as interesting as some of the other stuff in here. There's this image here of the big body yoga. She drew this photo of herself like doing yoga. She talks about like, you know, kind of getting over some of the issues with like doing yoga and like how they created this yoga for big bodies so that like people could actually go into a space that they felt comfortable in to move their fucking bodies. Like, let me tell you, I have been the only fat girl in the room at points in my life, and it's like, you know, when you're so much bigger, you know, It could be, you know, your body is like this political statement. How you show it, how you put it, like people are looking at you. They're like, it's real. So like that can be like also a real hindrance for people to like get proper exercise and to take care of themselves, because it's just like the shame. So anyway, I liked her kind of talking about that. Okay, so the fat ass cheerleaders thing. Fat ass PDX. 'Cause this woman is like, she was from Portland. I don't know if she still lives here, but yeah, I got this like many years ago, living here. The first 2 years, or you never get tired of hearing nice pom-poms. Right now we are on hiatus. Most of the cheerleaders have busy lives. They are students, full-time workers, and parents. Many have other activities and political causes that they also work on. For Fat Ass to be as awesome and powerful as we wanted took a strong commitment of time. It was exciting to be asked to be at so many diverse and important events. When we were getting ready for one, we would practice sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. God, this is like 2004 she's writing about this. We would all love it if Fat Ass PDX continued, and we are hoping one day soon it can be revived. Maybe by a new group of cheerleaders. Anyone could start up a Fat Ass in their own town, and we highly recommend it. Besides the absolute fun, chub love, and awesome fat positive lyrics you get to shout at people, you get pom-poms. The last ingredient cannot be overrated. Hey you, Fat Ass Knights pom-poms. And then so she did some chats with like some of the cheerleaders, so I think I'll talk to you about that a bit. How effective do you, this is with Kim, who's a cheerleader. How effective do you think things like fat performance art, cheerleading, burlesque, synchronized swimming are in fighting sizeism and fat hatred? They are one of the many tools in educating people about sizeism. The media and diet industry is so focused on showing people of size in an unflattering way. Fat performance art for me is an instrument used to dispel the myths and beliefs that fat people are not sexy or desirable. And this is by Liv. This is a question for Liv that is also like a fat ass cheerleader, part of this group. I learned how to perform. How did you change by being in Fat Ass? I learned how to perform in the body I have now. I used to be in shows all the time as a kid, but somewhere along the way I forgot how much I love it. This was an opportunity to reconnect with myself. Let's see. Here we go. This is Chelsea. What surprised you most about being in Fat Ass? It was great to see the group get together and form cheers and movements from scratch. We were able to work with everyone's abilities and come up with something fabulous. I was also surprised by how popular and in-demand Fat Ass became, and people would once in a while recognize me on the street and compliment me and the cheerleaders. People I would have never expected it from. Those were great reminders about how much Fat Ass gets our message across. Okay. And then this is Chrissy. What made you want to be a cheerleader? I had wanted to do a fat cheerleading squad since I took a radical cheerleading workshop at the first Portland Zine Symposium in 2001. But it wasn't until I was at the planning meeting for the first Fat Girl Speaks in 2003 that it took shape. Here was a great opportunity to form it with a particular event as a deadline and an instant cheerleading squad. And so they have some of their cheers. Let me do one of these for you. This is gonna be funny. Let's see if there's any others. They're all kind of, I'm not really, I mean, I'm a cheerleader, but I'm not, right? Hey you, or hey you, get out of my way, 'cause this fat girl is gonna rock it today. Hey you, watch what you say, 'cause your self-worth ain't about what you weigh. Hey you, don't get in our way, 'cause the fat revolution is here to stay. I see I have a question from Nicole B. My channel has been monetized for a while. So, yes. I have also recently gotten super chat, so, you know, people can also do super chat on this channel, meaning like you can give a little money to the channel and like have a message kind of come across. It's a way of interacting. So yeah, this channel is monetized, and I highly recommend that women, you know, if you are, you know, if you have a channel, it is kind of a good idea to monetize it, because if you're going to be doing it anyway, like, it's, you know, you might as well get paid. I mean, it doesn't pay the bills, but like those like once a year checks are like really exciting. And I recently got one, and I was just like, you know, it's a good feeling. She has an excerpt from Bell Hooks's book Communion: The Female Search for Love. It's interesting. I was talking about that book recently. I don't really like that book, but yeah. Okay. Oh, this is really cool. So this is a lesson in fat history. I'm really glad this is in here. I'm going to read this to you, because this is part of like what you can do with the zine format. Like, if you find something cool, you can like share it and reprint it. So like, this is from 1973. Like, people were doing fat activism back then, and like we don't get to hear about it as much, but it was like a part of like the cultural landscape. So in 1972, a group of women from Los Angeles met while training at the Radical Psychiatry Center. They created the Fat Underground. The Fat Underground. Like the weather underground, right? That's rad. And began making noise, speeches, handouts, and history. The contribution they made to the fat liberation movement is huge. largess.net has done an excellent job of archiving all the FU information, Fat Underground. You can read all about them, including original pamphlets and articles, and then she has a link here. And it's like one of the old internet links with the HTML. She included the HTML. And just hello to everyone in the chat. I see others have said hi to me. I know I've been wrapped up in this, but you know, this is kind of just what I'm doing tonight. So the Fat Liberation Manifesto. We believe that fat people are fully entitled to human respect and recognition. 2, we are angry at mistreatment by commercial and sexist interests. These have exploited our bodies as objects of ridicule, thereby creating an immensely profitable market selling the false promise of avoidance of or relief from that ridicule. 3, we see our struggle as allied with the struggles of other oppressed groups against classism, racism, sexism, ageism, financial exploitation, imperialism, and the like. This is radical shit. We demand equal rights for fat people in all aspects of life as promised in the Constitution of the United States. We demand equal access to goods and services in the public domain and an end to discrimination against us in the areas of employment, education, public facilities, and health services. 5, we single out as our special enemies the so-called reducing industries. These include diet clubs, reducing salons, fat farms, diet doctors, diet books, diet foods and food supplements, surgical procedures, appetite suppressants, drugs, and gadgetry such as wraps and reducing machines. We demand that they take responsibility for their false claims, acknowledge that their products are harmful to the public health, and publish long-term studies proving any statistical efficacy of their products. We make this demand knowing that over 99% of all weight loss programs, when evaluated over a 5-year period, fail utterly, and also knowing the extreme proven harmfulness of frequent large changes in weight. 6. We repudiate the mystified science, which falsely claims that we are unfit. It has both caused and upheld discrimination against us in collusion with the financial interests of insurance companies, the fashion and garment industries, reducing industries, the food and drug industries, and the medical and psychiatric establishment. 7. We refuse to be subjugated to the interests of our enemies. We fully intend to reclaim power over our bodies and our lives. We commit ourselves to pursue these goals together. Fat people of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose. So, in here, this is, I think the last thing I'll probably read in here is kind of what the health at every size movement is about from their own perspective, because I've seen like a lot of people just like immediately attack anyone who talks about this, but I have to say, as somebody who has like struggled with like being considered overweight and even obese at one point in my life, like it is so important to encourage health wherever you're at. And like that means, you know, really kind of encouraging people to participate as they are in whatever way they can in making their health better. So it's just, some people just like to punch down and be assholes. I mean, and that's just the world we live in. Health at every size, HAES, is a body positive and mind changing movement that is becoming more and more popular and getting some media coverage. The basic philosophy is 1. Total health enhancement and well-being rather than weight loss or achieving a specific ideal weight. 2. Self-acceptance and respect for the diversity of bodies that come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, rather than the pursuit of an idealized weight at all costs. 3. The pleasure of eating well based on internal cues of hunger and satiety, rather than on external food plan or diets. 4. The joy of movement, encouraging all physical activities rather than prescribing a specific routine of regimented exercise. Oh, my cat is trying to come up here. No, baby. I'm sorry, not today. Let me stop here. Is there anything else I want to show you in the scene? Because I see that you all are typing. Yeah, here's a piece of art. This is Body War. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and then on the back she has like an image of the fat ass PDX cheerleaders. Be interesting to look them up and see if they're doing anything. Yeah, this was put out by Ponyboy Press. Figure 8. Okay, so let me respond to some of your comments. Selling Carrera says it's so much more expensive to eat healthy than to eat carb, sugar heavy foods, I find. Well, I mean, it's just, they make it so much more convenient, you know. I think life isn't really set up to like actually even eat a balanced, healthy way. One thing I would suggest though too is like maybe trying to grow some of your own food. You know, if it is kind of costly for you to have like fresh fruits and vegetables, like one thing you can do is like just have a tiny little garden. I have on my windowsill right now like onions, things like that growing, and you know that's something that I don't have to buy, you know, and it's kind of a way to get greens, you know, when I maybe don't have. For me, it's a lot about like physical ability, you know, to get around, because you know it's winter, so my body kind of tends to not work as well. Yeah, and I've also had like periods too. Like I've do like eat in a routine way now, just because you know, I have a tendency to not, or to forget to eat, I would say, and so like, I've had situations where like I've gotten like lightheaded or like sick just from not eating enough. So once it happened a couple times, I really like put my foot down and made sure that I'm like eating at regular intervals. Yeah, I mean, it is a total sea change. Like when I lost a bunch of weight a couple of years ago, like I was completely treated totally differently. Some people were shocked at it, like, which I understand, because you know I do have like I do have politics that are like, you know, very in alignment with like a lot of what's in this like zine I was just sharing with you. But like, yeah, so some of my friends were concerned, and the main thing was that how fast it happened. But yeah, these things sometimes happen in life. I find I've had periods where I've been bigger than others, and you know, just losing that weight really really changed things for me in terms of like attention, and in terms of like fitting in, and just like buying clothes too. Like simple tasks that were like such a challenge for me had become simple finally. Like things that like I think a lot of people take for granted. So I mean, yeah, and then apart from that, just like a lot of the attention and like people want to know, like, and just yeah, also just like interest in me as well, like that most didn't really exist before too, like romantically speaking. That was another thing, and like we're not allowed to like notice or talk about it, right? I've been gaining recently too, but it's winter and I'm okay with it. Okay, so this next one that I'm gonna look at with you is called "Get This Woman a Contraption." Content. So basically, this is about birth control and just gynecology in general. So the contents just have birth control methods they don't want you to know about, that is not a period, on activity and passivity and reproductive biology, annual pelvic exams, fun facts about serotonin, how to get sick by getting well, and an epidemic of female castration. So I think let's look at how to get sick by getting well. That sounds interesting. Oh wait, now let me read this. This is part of the annual pelvic exams section. For many women, growing up and coming into maturity has become intertwined with two medical interventions: hormonal birth control and annual gynecological exams. It is often seen as a woman taking control of her body and being responsible when she does these things. The experts have led us to believe that women face a high enough risk of developing cervical cancer that we need annual screening. However, the risk is not high, less than 1%, and the screening is not reliable, nor is it risk-free. Prostate cancer is 15 times more common than cervical cancer, yet men are not advised to be screened yearly for prostate cancer, nor are they encouraged as teenagers or young adults to get screened for testicular cancer, which is about as likely as cervical cancer, less than 1%. This is interesting. I'll share this too. Is the risk of cervical cancer high? Do we need annual screening? The risk is not high, less than 1%. And doctors in the rest of the world do not recommend annual exams in symptom-free women or young women, generally under 30. Finland has the lowest rates of cervical cancer in the world and recommends pelvic exams only every 5 years after the age of 30. Ovarian and uterine cancer are more common than cervical cancer. Thyroid and bladder cancer are more common than cervical cancer, yet we are not bullied into invasive screenings for those diseases, perhaps because men also have thyroids and bladders. I mean, to respond to Blue P in the comment section, there could be reasons why I think somebody may need to have pelvic exams yearly, but this idea that all women should is kind of a problem. And again, it does have to do with the level with which, really, I mean, it's about management of women as reproductive vessels, essentially. And it's putting, and it's also about, I think, in a way, it's a psychological thing about making us aware of ourselves in that way. You know, this is part of being part of the sex class that we are. It's just the way in which we are monitored and just interfered with via our reproductive system. Okay, so this section is called How to Get Sick by Getting Well. One thing anyone can notice about Western medicine as it is practiced today is that often people go in with problems that are significantly distressing, but for which no underlying biological problems or pathologies are in evidence, and come out with major problems and an increasing list of physical issues. Examples of this might be discomfort or pain from menstrual cramps or pregnancy, fatigue, headaches, insomnia, difficulty concentrating, etc. In these cases, people often come out of treatment with real biological issues like organ failure, organ removal, or brain damage, which the medical system claims to have uncovered, but which in reality it has manufactured. This snowball effect is often the result of a series of medical interventions, each of which causes problems that appear to necessitate another intervention. New pathologies and processes that pop up when a person is undergoing treatment are often attributed to an underlying illness rather than to medical treatment. And the necessity for medical treatment then appears even more crucial and at times does become unavoidable because one has been severely injured. It is a dangerous chain of events whose nature is often obscured for the patient by a bewildering complex of side effects, etc. A crucial hidden mechanism which may occur at any step along the way is the lack of informed consent. True informed consent is, in my opinion, almost never given, since the system as it exists assumes that the doctor has information, knowledge, and expertise that cannot be grasped or properly evaluated by a layperson, patient. Therefore, doctors actively resist giving accurate information, which is by necessity complicated, to patients, including information about whether or not a diagnosis is a theory or a fact, whether a treatment is necessary or merely recommended, how the biology or physiology in question works, etc. The explanations given to patients are most often metaphors, abstractions, gross simplifications, and glaring omissions. These are often so distorting that the patient could not reasonably be said to be informed and therefore cannot reasonably be said to be consenting. Women need to be aware of the general pattern of cascading interventions, as well as some of the most common ways it happens, so that they can advocate for themselves in a dangerous medical system, or in some cases, avoid it altogether. Let's see. And then the last section is on unnecessary hysterectomies. The most common gynecological surgical procedure is hysterectomy. In 2003, over 600,000 hysterectomies were performed in the United States alone, of which over 90% were performed for benign conditions. Surpassing tonsillectomy, hysterectomy is now the most commonly performed major operation in the country. If the present rates continue, 62% of all women in the United States will have a hysterectomy by the time they are 70. Over half of women in the U.S. will have their reproductive system removed in the name of creating a healthy body. If this doesn't show clearly that the female body, precisely by virtue of its femaleness, is seen as pathological and in need of alteration, I don't know what does. Ooh. Undergoing hysterectomy will, of course, often happen after nearly a lifetime on the pill, which continuously alters and interferes with major body systems and causes an astonishing panoply of iatrogenic effects, or iatrogenic side effects. No woman is safe at any time from the pressure to medically manage her reproductive ability and her reproductive organs, not even girls who have not become sexually active, nor lesbians who have no chance of becoming pregnant inadvertently. Everyone knows that in men, castration is the removal of the testicles. In women, it is the removal of the ovaries, but hysterectomy/oophorectomy is almost never described accurately as castration. If you have any doubt that men and medicine view the castration of women differently than they would the castration of men, take a look at the following footnote from Unnecessary Hysterectomy, The Lack of Informed Consent by Patricia Quintilian. Women's reproductive systems are often operated on far more often than our male reproductive systems. Lewis and Lewis Supernote 14 at 866. Surgeons at a cancer conference agreed that they rarely hesitate to remove an ovary, but think twice about removing a testicle. The physicians readily admitted that such a sex-oriented viewpoint arises from the fact that most surgeons are male. Yeah, so this is quite a zine. Get this woman a contraption, sorry. What should we look at next? Ooh, okay. This one actually I don't think, do I want to read through this? Sorry to freak you all out. That's a pretty heavy zine. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip that one. This one is The Little Prick by Zine. You may cry, you may laugh, you may get angry, but you will recognize the little prick. Backstory to this one, I picked this up at Radfem Reboot, Kathy Brennan had brought a bunch of these, I believe, and left them. And it's signed, it says, "In Sisterhood and Power" by ZZ. Help! And it's in the women's symbol. So this is from 1975. All rights reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part or in any form. So basically, like, it's a bunch of little penises. And this is the only time I will have anything like this on my channel. So you're, all 11 of you are in for a treat. I kept telling Sally that I always wanted a son, so she gave him to me. Now then, Miss Jones, besides typing 180 words per minute and taking excellent shorthand, what have you got to offer? Oh, let me kind of pull this up. See, it's not. What do you mean, no? Do you realize what I spent tonight? You and your ladies lib movement have taken my manhood. Where's your sense of humor? Ugh, I don't even want to read that. Nah, I got sensitive skin. Take a pill or something. This one's my favorite one. You won't sleep with me for political reasons, but we're both Democrats. I only gave the chick my usual "hi baby" and she flipped out. Oh, some of these are horrible. This is funny. This will trigger some people. What do you mean I'm only an overgrown clitoris? And society has come so far that I've now seen men on the internet make these claims about their own penises as well. Ugh. So you run a chance of chromosome damage, dizziness, weight gain, blood clots, cancer, skin blemishes. You don't want to get pregnant, do ya? What do you mean I'm ignoring your clitoris? Before you joined the women's movement, you didn't know you had one. Oh God, this one's so real. With this t-shirt and my new approach, I have found a place to meet girls. Yep. Too fucking true. Ugh. I'm a male chauvinist. What? Ugh. Blood. Can she do this? If God had meant for me to do dishes, he'd have made me a girl. You can't be a lesbian, you're my wife. This one's brilliant. Only a man can have a vaginal orgasm. Now, boys and girls, today's topic is the role of man in modern society. It's so hard to find a nice old-fashioned girl nowadays. Without me, you're nothing. Nothing. Well, yeah, that's my funniest zine. Alright, so let's see. This next one is one I picked up last year. It was produced in Western Washington. Actually, this is a more recent radical feminist publication. It's called Ugly Women, with a Y, with Ugly Thoughts. No men beyond this point. There's a thing about lesbian houses in Olympia. And kind of goes into some of the history of like women's like separatist houses that existed at the time. Like these were all over. Like women would group together and rent out a home, and it would be like kind of a separatist community center. Like when you think about separatism, it's not just like this like outside of society thing. Like they were creating their own little worlds within, like everywhere, or that's what they do. No, I don't get these zines at conventions. Sometimes people just give them to me, or where I live, like there are a lot of shops that carry zines. Just it's part of the culture here in Portland. Like this is a place where people publish stuff like this. So that's where I get a lot of them. I also sometimes when I go up to Seattle too, like I try to always stop at Left Bank Books and see what kind of zines they have there too, you know. Like I try to go to like independent, like radical places and pick them up if I can. Let's see what I want to share from this zine. There's a lot of vulvas in it, I will say. Demystifying radical feminism. So, gender is oppressive. TERF is a slur. Every woman can be a lesbian. So they kind of address this. Actually, let's see. Yeah, these are some of the things that like initially like put people off of like radical feminism, just because these are like such extreme ideas, right? So they break them down and kind of look at, you know, why they aren't so extreme. I don't know about TERF as a slur being an extreme idea, but like, yeah. they created this is an interesting part of it. There is a crossword, radical feminist crossword, which is really creative, neat idea. So some of the questions, let's try and do one. Down, 1, activist and poet, author of Sister Outsider. That would be Lorde, Lorde. 2, author of The Dialectic of Sex. That would be Firestone. 2 down. Firestone. Yep. Author of many works, including Women, Culture, Politics. Is that Angela Davis? Women, Culture, Politics. Davis. Guess who knows her shit? Well-known author of Woman-Hating and Other Works. 3 across, that would be Dworkin. Founder of Dianic Wicca and author of works including The Holy Book of Women's Mysteries. That is 4 across. That is Budapest, the Budapest. Author of Nothing Matters, a feminist critique of postmodernism. I have not read that. Have I? Okay, so I don't know that one. If anybody knows it, you have a spot you could fill. Author of Beauty and Misogyny, The Spinster and Her Enemies, and many others. 7 across, that's what, Jeffries. Author of Gynecology and Beyond God the Father. 9 across, that is, of course, Daly. Author of Where We Stand, Class Matters, and others. Shoot, who is that? 10. All right, help me out, people. You've got 2. 2 I need your answers on. Who wrote Nothing Matters, a feminist critique of postmodernism, and who wrote Where We Stand, Class Matters? Because that's what I'm stumped on. Oh, there's one about, there is a piece on detransitioning in here, written by a detransition woman. Common themes of transition, a detransition woman's thoughts on the social roots of transition. I am the happiest I have ever been, desperate for an answer given the problems. First, I want to break down what is so common in trans posts, the statement that I am the happiest I've ever been, or I am finally recognizing myself in the mirror, or that the time you've been on testosterone is the best time of your life. When young females are given a magic answer, an explanation for why we always felt alienated and different as children, an answer that has us dissecting our childhood toy preferences to find inner maleness so we can just understand ourselves as born in the wrong body and needing to change, we are desperate for that fix. It is much easier to accept that all you need to feel better is hormones injected intramuscularly every week and surgery to truly be yourself than it is to accept that you were not born in the wrong body. The world just wants you to be. What else is in here? Thank you, Nicole. So there's a thing about prostitution and then about bondage, sadomasochism. Bondage is not liberation. Why are you sexualizing power imbalances? And then they quote Audre Lorde here, speaking about sadomasochism, which is an interesting thing. It's so interesting. This is what happens to women. Like, either you get erased or you get co-opted into the machine. And that's the case with Audre Lorde. And it's very, you need to pay attention to what of her work is like upheld and like what isn't, and how it's taught. Because like when I've spoken to women who've like taken gender studies, or even men who have, like, their familiarity with Lorde does not include any of this. So I would really recommend that people go out of their way to look into her views on these subjects, because I think she actually handles it better than most anyone I've read. Why don't we talk about faking it? So, talking about women's propensity to fake orgasms when they have sex with men. Male fantasies. Male fantasies is everything run by male fantasies, up on a pedestal, down on your knees. It's all a male fantasy that you're strong enough to take what they dish out, or else too weak to do anything about it. Then there's some memes. They put some memes in here. This is like, printing a zine can be easy. When you're thinking back on past relationships, but now with a radical feminist perspective, and you realize what was really going on. My boyfriend thinks I should. My boyfriend doesn't like it when my boyfriend doesn't want me to speak to. Dump him. Oh, this is interesting. I chose lesbianism, a letter to patriarchy. Dear patriarchy, I am an ex-heterosexual. Heterosexuality was chosen for me and all little girls from birth. It's a girl means something significant in our culture. She will like pink. She will like makeup. And most importantly, she will be owned and fucked by a man. But you can't frame it like that. You had to sell it to us our whole lives. Heterosexual couples are everywhere in media. They are portrayed as happy, fulfilled, normal, relaxed, and correct. I drank these. I cried 5 times the first time I saw Titanic at 12 years old. I would like to thank Leonardo DiCaprio for awakening some girls' interest in kissing me when I was a little girl. That movie was a problem. I fucking hated it. But I got drunk to it several times by some of my little girlfriends and had to watch it at their house, and it was just, that was quite an experience. Heterosexuality for the duration of my girlhood was a God-approved, religiously sanctioned pathway to external happiness and love and acceptance. When in a man's arms, you are in God's arms, and God is the creator of all the heavens and the earth, the Alpha and Omega, your Savior and Messiah. I had to find a man, and this was easy for me. I devoured all of your messages about lesbians, about women in general. I internalized your messages about female love and friendships. Women are dramatic, backstabbing, and men make far better life partners. I loved many men and poured a lot of love and effort into them. I loved doting on them. I loved worshiping them. Though heterosexuality was forced onto me from birth, I accepted it with open arms. But all of your messages to me about men were lies. I am far more likely to be killed by a man than to be protected by him. A marriage to a man at best means significant emotional labor from me, and at worst being abused, raped, tortured, and violently killed. Even if I were one of the quote-unquote lucky ones and survived a marriage to a man, I could no longer stomach having sex with someone who does not see me as fully human, someone who jerks off to videos of women who look exactly like me being raped and beaten, someone who I could not rely on to understand me. The worst part is that this isn't just one man, it is all of them. They all do not and will not ever see me as an equal to them. So I chose women, etc. So, yeah. Got that. May you never be subservient. May you never fall prey to fitting in. May you always swirl in all the directions the sacred winds want to take you. May you never hush your laughter nor your tears. May you breathe without restriction. May you show up every day to the calling that is you. And may you always know the courage of your heart. Big Allie. And then there's some resources listed in the back for because this is Western Washington. And then some independent women's media. Sadly, I'm not included. Maybe next time. Okay. So, yeah. Let's see what else we have here. I've been on here a while. I know that. A little over an hour. I could probably get through these. I just had it here to come on here and do this. I thought it would be fun. So I want to thank you for like watching this with me as I kind of stroll through these and share them with you. This one is called Skinned Heart Quattro. I don't remember how I came across this zine, but it's like one of these ones where the author kind of tells a story about her life. So I'll read to you the introduction. Life leads you where you need to be to learn the shit that you are supposed to learn about yourself. Different choices lead you different places. Different occurrences lead you different places. Sometimes life forces you in a direction that you never meant to take. This is Skinned Heart Numero Quattro, the 4th issue I have published. I am a slow rider with too many project commitments, too much life to live, not enough times, and a severe lack of focus. These thoughts build inside of me and follow me wherever I go until the dam inside my brain bursts. I need to get these thoughts and stories out my brain and free up some space for new experiences, thoughts, emotions, challenges, stories, and new survival tactics. I'm looking forward to the future, looking forward to new projects, new friends, and new times with old friends. Thanks for taking the time to read these thoughts and stories that are my life. It means a lot to me. It says besos y abrazos. And I don't speak Spanish, so I want to apologize for any mispronunciation. The woman who writes this is called Nikki Gomez. This issue deals with sensitive and triggering subjects. Please take care of yourself. So she talks about moving to Seattle and kind of like trying to figure out living there. Kind of her experiences. Let me read this. Meeting folks has been the most interesting experience. My southwestern social upbringing has led me to say hi to folks I know when I see them, or at the very least acknowledge their presence. This does not fly here, needless to say, makes for awkward experiences like saying hi to someone and then they pretend you do not exist. Initially, this was really difficult for me to deal with scenarios like this because I am a sensitive Aries-Taurus cusp, oh God, who internalizes and overanalyzes everything, but slowly I have gotten used to people's social quirks. Some folks tell me it is because there are so many Midwesterners here that they have different ways of expressing themselves and dealing with people. Other people tell me that the city has really been influenced by Nordic cultures and ways. Some people tell me that all the gray gloominess will eventually change me too. A lot of people tell me that's just Seattle for you. It's kind of weird. Despite this, I say hi anyways and still try to have conversations with people even if I know that they will get awkward. I don't want to stop saying hi or smiling at people or get introverted. I want to continue to be a Southwestern brown lady who happens to live in the Northwest. And I'm going to read a little bit. She wrote about being sexually assaulted, so I'm going to read this page of what she wrote here because I think it's pretty powerful. And I think this is a way, you know, in which, like, I've seen a lot of women process things that have gone on in their lives. And it's this really great form of consciousness raising to put it out this way, to share and to, like, be open. I am ready to talk about this. I know last time I said that I would never talk about this because I wanted to move on with my life, but I can't move on without fucking saying something. I told him that I wouldn't say anything. I told him that I just didn't want to talk to him anymore and that I didn't want to share our surviving dog anymore. I made a ritual with her, the rad lady friend of mine that he sexually assaulted. We burned old journals that chronicled years of emotional manipulation, self-blaming whys, pages and pages of pain, pictures of us in our lives, drawings, punk flyers, and the memory of the life I had lived. I set my intentions on a harmonious moving on from each other. We, me, and her talked about him and his impact on us. We talked about rising from the ashes of the pain and focusing on the future and putting that sorrow into creative outlets. I let the wind carry the smoke of those disappointing years away that gray day. I wanted it to be the end of processing that part of my life, but it was only the beginning of this long, arduous process that is recovering from abusive and manipulative situations. So much continues to rise up as a result of spending so much time with him. I don't want to hold my tongue anymore and continue the cycle of abuse and silence that is thrust upon so many women. I don't want to carry the sadness of having let myself be weak and continuing to honor an unnecessary subservience to someone who no longer has the ability to affect me as deeply as he did. There is no reason why me and her should be forced to hold on to his secret. It's not fair or realistic. These things have a way of finding their way out. I'm not scared of what other people think because it's the truth. And I was there and she was there. People can and will do what they will with this information, and I know I cannot control it, nor am I interested in controlling it. I am not scared of how he feels, because if he cared, then he wouldn't have let this stay in the dark. I am not interested in trying to portray his side of the story, because he can write his own fucking zine and tell his side if he wants to. I have compassion for him. I am well acquainted with his bright positive side as well as his shadow, but I have more compassion for me and her. Silence makes you wither inside and grow tired and jaded and angry. I won't let those things grow in me anymore or ever again. More importantly, we make our own paths and we are ultimately responsible for everything we do and say. I am sure that he would dispute a lot of this by saying I was destructive and crazy. There were many dimensions to our relationship, and I am admittedly no angel. These are my encounters, my stories, and my perspectives to this particular layer of our relationship that I experienced. I struggled a lot on whether or not to write about this. I wanted to tuck these feelings and memories away in the back of my mind, but they just kept coming up. I was afraid of being judged by our social group. I was afraid people wouldn't believe me and would question me. I was ashamed of what I had allowed myself to become. I decided that I didn't care. I've never been one to be quiet, and I decided that I'm not going to start now. I realized that I am strong, and I have held my head high through some tough shit, and I can continue to keep my head up through whatever comes of me writing about my former relationship. So she writes about being in an open relationship and like kind of the issues with manipulation and consent. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I thought like her intro there was very powerful and matter of the fact, and how she kind of, it is very difficult for people to speak out about being abused, and I think it's like it's really treated badly. And like as women, if you have any like anger or anything like that and how you express yourself, it can get like just totally misread and misunderstood and like really pilloried for it. Women reacting in anger is never acceptable. That's what I've seen. So yeah, this zine has a lot of really gorgeous, like she really decorates it well. Like this is in terms of like a zine being put together, the theme, she has like crystals and plants, and she has like a lot of Southwestern imagery to like reflect, herself, where she comes from, and kind of her culture in a way. Oh, she quotes Zora Neale Hurston. If you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. I'll read this bit to you too. Mi cuerpo es mío. You age, your body changes. Sometimes you choose to make lifestyle choices to accommodate those changes. These days, my creaking body has been the catalyst for change, leading me away from the life that I thought I would live and towards another. I don't eat the same, I don't socialize the same, and even my clothing choices have changed to accommodate what my body needs to remain healthy. For the past 10 years of my life, I have lived with chronic bladder infections. I would get at least 5 to 10 infections a year, lasting up to 3 days a week. Painful days spent running between the toilet, a hot bath, and a heating pad in an attempt to relieve the extreme discomfort that almost always landed me in the emergency room in the middle of the night. Nothing can be accomplished in the throes of an infection. No meal prep, no projects or chores. Reading and watching movies was futile, as all I can do is sit and hold my crotch and cry. Emergency room visits were pointless except to get extra strength, Pridine, and antibiotics that would wreak havoc on my body, and in particular my digestive system and my cunt. Almost half of the visits that I was experiencing pain, there wouldn't be any infection present, so emergency doctors would assume that I was pain med seeking by the way that I looked, and dismiss my claims and tell me to see my regular doctor. One doctor even told me that they don't make diagnoses in the ER and that I was wasting his time. This occurred in the George W. Bush era, where his policy was that emergency rooms can't churn you away style health care. I was like many other broke motherfuckers in this country, did not and do not have health insurance or extra money to remedy my problems, so my pain and ongoing discomfort continued. I was worried, but I put it out of my mind the best I could, because there was nothing I could do about it. Hello, Kiki. So, I mean, yeah, what you find, a lot of the times in these is just so real. I've got 2 more that I want to look through tonight. And consequently, I found one that I'd like to do a show on in and of itself. So I think, that was something to look forward to in the near future. This next one is why the radical mental health critique is crucial to radical feminism. It is produced by the same woman, I think, who did Get This Woman a Contraption. Let's look at what's the contents are. I think sections 4 and 5 are going to be interesting. Radical mental health fact and vintage psychiatric drug ads dealing with women. There's also a section, the beginning is just talking about radical mental health critique and why it's crucial to radical feminism, like the title, Radical Mental Health and the Disability Rights and Social Justice Movements, the ethical issue of consent in psychiatry, on people of color in psychiatric drug ads. They might look at that too. So 4, let's look for that. This is, frequently asked questions. This is so also out of left field. How can you be opposed to psychiatry? Where are you coming from? It may seem out of left field, but we approach psychiatry in ways that actually have a long history. We are attempting to reconceptualize madness in ways that join strong existing traditions of opposition to and critique of psychiatry. 1. The movements and struggles of those with lived experience of both madness and psychiatric abuse since the 1960s. Example, the consumer survivor ex-patient movement of the 1970s, the Mad Pride movement, some strains of the disability rights movement, feminism, which were very influenced by the civil rights movement in the United States. 2. The work of theoreticians, philosophers, and other scholars, as well as journalists and mental health practitioners like therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. Most, if not all, of these traditions share a commitment to egalitarianism and have concerned themselves with psychiatry as it relates to civil and human rights, political, social, and legal power dynamics, issues of social control, physical and psychological abuse, and the conflicts of interest involved in medical care, the pharmaceutical and medical device industries, and academic psychiatric research. We are a community with ethical and political commitments to feminism, anti-racism, gay rights, and various stripes of political radicalism. We have found that feminist spaces and disability rights spaces in particular have not been particularly keen to hear our voices, and we want to remedy that. Aren't all anti-psychiatry people Scientologists? Tom Cruise hates psychiatry, and he's clearly out to lunch. Therefore, you must be out to lunch. We do not approve of nor engage in the anti-psychiatric campaigning of the cult of Scientology. Hitler enjoyed vegetarianism and watercolors. What do you mean when you say that mental illness is not real, or that depression, schizophrenia, other label is not real? Are you denying my very real suffering? Are you suggesting that it's all actually under my control? To say that mental illness or that a specific illness is not real does not imply that your suffering is either made up, a figment of your imagination, or something that you should be able to bootstrap your way out of. Rather, it points out that there is no scientific basis for the ways in which psychiatry has chosen to categorize and conceptualize mental illness, both in terms of psychiatry's chemical imbalance, brain disorder etiology narrative, as well as in terms of the DSM and diagnostic labels. Depression is not real, but mental emotional anguish clearly is. Schizophrenia is not real, but extreme mental states obviously are. You get the idea. Psychiatric labels pathologize human emotion and human experiences and depoliticize and decontextualize emotional anguish. That is very true. They also encourage people to take on a sick role identity, which makes them more vulnerable to long-term recurring crisis, teaches helplessness, and puts people in a position in which their material needs being met is contingent upon remaining ill. The last piece, but science has proven that psychiatry is right. Psychiatry is cutting-edge science. Psychiatry is so absurdly unscientific that we can only scratch the surface here. From the creation of diagnostic labels, the DSM, to diagnosis itself, to research on pharmaceuticals, to the search for genes for mental illness, to brain scans, psychiatry is very rarely good science. In cases where science does not support the psychiatric pharmaceutical narrative, it is ignored or buried. Even well-respected mainstream publications are starting to realize that psychiatry is not a science. An example of this is the article, Can Psychiatry Be a Science? In the New Yorker, and The Epidemic of Mental Illness, Why? And Drug Companies and Doctors, A Story of Corruption in the New York Review of Books. The historical reasons for why psychiatry attempted in the 1950s to remake its image in order to be seen as a branch of medicine, in part by explicitly striving to increase its ability to appear quote-unquote scientific, have less to do with helping people and more to do with economic, cultural, and political forces. See Metzel's Prozac on the Couch. Let's see. So there's like a lot of questions, about like how do you deal with somebody who is a threat to others, like what about drugs, etc. How could you live with yourself if someone committed suicide after you dare to critique psychiatry and convince them to go off their meds? So yeah, they really answer a lot of questions, and yeah, this is like, it's really, really just, it's one of those things that's really hard to be against because, again, it's attached to science and we cannot question that God, right? Oh, hi, Think Shank or Sean K. Thank you for being here. So this next section is interesting. It's vintage psychiatric drug ads concerning women. So like sexist ads. A sleeping pill for night squawks. Doriden, 1944. Caption reads in part, she has insomnia, so if he's awake, restless and irritable, she growls at her husband. How can this shrew be tamed? Here's an advertisement for Valium from, what year is this? Does it say? 1970. Okay. Women dominate his universe. Psychic tension rules his life. The central male figure's interpersonal relationships, sociometrically diagrammed, reveal the patterns of dominance and closeness he has with the principal people in his life. In this individual, domination by women has led to psychic tension. He doesn't understand the source of his psychic tension, but you do. He relates well to women with domineering traits. I think psychology is a little bit different than psychiatry, which is like kind of this medicalization of like the psychological. It's like that's the distinction. So psychiatry, you would see a psychologist to kind of look at like what your problem is, right? But a psychiatrist is the one who dispenses like pills to fix your brain chemistry, right? Anquil advertisement. This is British Journal of Psychiatry, 1973. Anquil, this first specific non-steroidal treatment for deviant and antisocial sexual behavior. Wow, what does this say? Anquil, a new synthetic neuroleptic, rapidly inhibits impulsive and uncontrolled psychosexual disorders and antisocial sexual behavior. In a number of clinical investigations, Anquil has proved of considerable value to patients whose offenses included exhibitionism, compulsive masturbation, incest, erotomania, and pedophilia. Anquil is not a steroid. There is no feminization or fear of irreversible castration. Like completely taking out the fact that men who are raping children and their female relatives have agency over themselves and should be in fucking jail. Not given a drug. Here's another. God, these are depressing. Okay, so here's another one for Valium. Caption reads in part, 35 single and psychoneurotic. The purser on her cruise ship took the last snapshot of Jan. You probably see many such Jans in your practice. The unmarried with low self-esteem Jan never found a man to measure up to her father. Now she realizes she is in a losing pattern and that she may never marry. Look at that. There's an interesting conversation happening right now in the chat, so yeah, I mean, people get mad at you if you express some level of control over yourself, period, and like you don't fall into like whatever pattern is socially acceptable. And it's interesting how much of our wellness again is tied to like consuming, right? Consume these drugs, like I mean, you know, the situation, you know, again, I mean, I think it's really sweet, you know. I say that, I don't say that with any kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Any kind of, when I say sweet, I mean it. It's very kind-hearted in this, that they bring up anguish, emotional and mental anguish that people go through, that like, you know, we're never even allowed to say that, you know. We have to talk about ourselves in these detached ways too when we have like these issues. Like, we can't just be like, I'm hurting, you know. You have to put it in this way that's like acceptable, so that like people can like categorize your fucking brain. It's really awful. This is one for Meprospan, 1967. Her kind of pressures last all day. Shouldn't her tranquilizer? Advertising that they give tranquilizers to the mother of a small child. Fuck. Okay, so we have some, this one's from 1964. Let's see. Advertising methamphetamines to, I assume, caption reads in part, adorable then, deplorable now. In overweight, control food and mood all day long with a single morning dose, right? Ambar methamphetamine, phenobarbital. So, that's nice. Wow, Kiki, that person sounds really fucking unable to treat anyone. You probably like rocked her reality, honestly, like saying some shit like that. Like, sometimes you just hit a wall with some people, you say something and they just don't know how to respond to you, because it's like it goes against all their programming. They're like, whoa. No. Their job is to basically monitor you and to get you to change your behavior, right? They're not there to counsel you about how you're gonna like change society, or how you can't really fucking affect most of the shit that's making you upset anyway. Like, you have no power of it. They're basically trying to train you to like forget that as well. And now if you can't affect it, just forget about it, you know, because it's too big to look at. Okay, then this is another advertisement for an amphetamine to help with menstrual dysfunction. To brighten the outlook in menstrual dysfunction, in the management of the depressive symptoms so frequently associated with primary dysmenorrhea, the physician will find dexedrine sulfate a valuable aid. Dexedrine may be depended upon to alleviate apathy, depression of mood, and psychogenic fatigue, and thereby to improve the patient's general mental outlook in this functional disorder. Okay, what else have we got here? Oh God. Now she can cook breakfast again when you prescribe new mornidine, which is what? This is a Canadian one from 1959. Okay, so yeah, this is for pregnant women. Oh, right, and here's some example people of color in the psychiatric ads. So this one is assaultive and belligerent, is what it says. I want you to look at that image for a moment. This is from 1974. And it's for Haldol. I've seen people on Haldol. It's horrible. They basically give it to you to slow you down. It makes your legs like, from what I can gather and from what I've seen, like it makes your legs just like totally frozen. And also, people have snapped on this drug. Like, people have gone on weird ass killing sprees on this drug and had all kinds of like issues. Well, of course they got upset by that, Nicole B. Good job. Did the snowflakes get offended? Appearing as outside is everything placed within the abject category of psychosis. Here lies the unspoken and unacknowledged deemed so as a result of race or social class or resistance to treatment or object choice. It took 30 years, for example, for persons of color to appear in pharmaceutical advertisements in the AJP, American Journal of Psychiatry. And when they did appear in the mid-1970s, they did so only as patients in antipsychotic medication advertisements, either as medicated inpatients on psychiatric wards or as assaultive and belligerent threats to society during an era when the journal pathologized the Black Power class of reactions. This is very interesting. So, like, these are the advertisements. I want you to think about what was happening with Black people in the U.S. at this time, that they're putting these type of images in the psychiatric journals. Social fucking control. Yeah, and so that's it. I mean, this is a great journal, or a great zine. I mean, they're threatened by that because, just to respond to Nicole B in the comment section, they are threatened by that because, obviously. What would happen if their careers became obsolete? What would they have to do? You know? Okay. Oh, God. It is disturbing. So you've witnessed it too, Turban Deva. It is really disturbing. I mean, you just see the difference in people when they've been doped up. I haven't talked about this much, but when I was 18, I worked in a psychiatric institute. I got a job, like, working in the kitchen, but occasionally I would serve, like, the patients, like, their food during mealtime. So I met a lot of them, and people would be, like, really bright, you know, and clearly suffering, and then there would just be, like, a total change in their demeanors after they, like, got drugged up, where they were just not even there anymore. And it's really scary to think that, like, they can just do that to people. And, you know, of course, they're just dangerous places as well, you know, all kinds of shit's going on. Okay, so let's move on. This is the last theme we're gonna look at. Why misogynists make great informants. Okay, so how gender violence on the left enables state violence in radical movements. In January 2009, activists in Austin, Texas, learned that one of their own, a white activist named Brandon Darby, had infiltrated groups protesting the Republican National Convention as an FBI informant. Darby later admitted to wearing recording devices at planning meetings and during the convention. He testified on behalf of the government in the February 2009 trial of two Texas activists who were arrested at the RNC on charges of making and possessing Molotov cocktails after Darby encouraged them to do so. I just want to say this. Watch out for anybody who is suggesting that you do anything illegal, okay? If you, like, be very fucking mindful of that, all right? And anybody who talks about any illegal shit they've done, That's a person to watch out for, okay? That is not a safe person, period. The two young men, David McKay and Bradley Crowder, each faced up to 15 years in prison. Crowder accepted a plea bargain to serve 3 years in a federal prison under pressure from federal prosecutors. McKay also pled guilty to being in possession of unregistered Molotov cocktails and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Information gathered by Darby may also have contributed to the case against the RNC 8 activists from around the country charged with conspiracy to riot and conspiracy to damage property in the furtherance of terrorism. Austin activists were particularly stunned by the revelation that Darby had served as an informant because he had been part of various leftist projects and was a leader at Common Ground Relief, a New Orleans-based organization committed to meeting the short-term needs of community members displaced by natural disasters in the Gulf Coast region and dedicated to rebuilding the region and ensuring Katrina evacuees' right to return. I was surprised but not shocked by this news. I had learned as an undergrad at the University of Texas that the campus police department routinely placed plainclothes police officers in the meetings of radical student groups, just to keep an eye on them. That was in fall 2001. We saw the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, watched a cowboy president wage war on terror, and in the middle of it all, tried to figure out what we could do to challenge the fascist state transformations taking place before our eyes. At the time, however, it seemed silly that there were cops in our meetings. We weren't the Panthers or the Brown Berets or even some of the rowdier direct action anti-globalization activists on campus, although we admired them all. We were just young people who didn't believe war was the best response to the 9/11 attacks. But it wasn't silly. The FBI does not dismiss political work. Any organization, be it large or small, can provoke the scrutiny of the state. Perhaps your organization poses a large threat, or maybe you're small now, but in one day you'll grow up and be too big to rein in. The state usually opts to kill the movement before it grows. And informants and provocateurs are the state's hired gunmen. Government agencies pick people that no one will notice. Often it's impossible to prove that they're informants because they appear to be completely dedicated to social justice. They establish intimate relationships with activists, becoming friends and lovers, often serving in leadership roles in organizations. A cursory reading of the literature on social movements and organizations in the 1960s and 70s reveals this fact. The leadership of the American Indian movement was rife with informants. It is suspected that informants were also largely responsible for the downfall of the Black Panther Party, and the same can be surmised about the anti-war movement of the 1960s and 70s. Not surprisingly, these movements that were toppled by informants and provocateurs were also sites where women and queer activists often experienced intense gender violence, as the autobiographies of activists such as Assata Shakur, Elaine Brown, and Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz demonstrate. Trying to see where to, so in this, I'm trying to figure out where to start. So they talk about this guy Darby and how let me see. Let me actually read this. Let me see where we're at. On Democracy Now!, Malik Rahim, former Black Panther and co-founder of Common Ground in New Orleans, spoke about how devastated he was by Darby's revelation that he was an FBI informant. Several times he stated that his heart had been broken. He especially lamented all of the young ladies who left Common Ground as a result of Darby's domineering, aggressive style of organizing. And when those young ladies, quote-unquote, complained, well, their concerns likely fell on sympathetic but ultimately unresponsive ears. Everything may have been true, and after the fact, everyone admits how disruptive Darby was, quick to suggest violent, ill-conceived direct action schemes that endangered everyone he worked with. There were even claims of Darby sexually assaulting female organizers at Common Ground, and in general being dismissive of women working in the organization. Darby created conflict in all of the organizations he worked with, yet people were hesitant to hold him accountable because of his history and reputation as an organizer and his quote-unquote dedication to quote-unquote the work. People continued to defend him until he outed himself as an FBI informant. Even Rahim, for all of his guilt and angst, chose to leave Darby in charge of Common Ground, although every time there was conflict in the organization, it seemed to involve Darby. Maybe if organizers made collective accountability around gender violence, and I'm sorry, I mean, this is not a radical feminist piece, but I do think it's really has a lot of critical information in it. A central part of our practices, we would neutralize people who are working on behalf of the state to undermine our struggles. I'm not talking about witch hunts. I'm talking about organizing in such a way that we nip a potential Brandon Darby in the bud before he can hurt more people. Informants are hard to spot, but my guess is that where there is smoke, there is fire. And someone who creates chaos wherever he goes is either an informant or an irresponsible, unaccountable time bomb who can be unintentionally as effective at undermining social justice organizing as an informant. Ultimately, they both do the work of the state and need to be held accountable. Reflecting on the radical organizations and social movements of the 1960s and 70s provides an important historical context for this discussion. Memoirs by women who were actively involved in these struggles reveal the pervasiveness of tolerance and, in some cases, advocacy of gender violence. Angela Davis, Assata Shakur, and Elaine Brown, each at different points in their experiences organizing with the Black Panther Party, cited sexism and the exploitation of women and their organizing labor in the BPP, Black Panther Party, as one of their primary reasons for either leaving the group in the cases of Brown and Shakur, or refusing to ever formally join in Davis's case. Although women were often expected to make significant personal sacrifices to support the movement, when women found themselves victimized by male comrades, there was no support for them or channels to seek redress. Whether it was the Black Panther Party organizers ignoring the fact that Eldridge Cleaver beat his wife, noted activist Kathleen Cleaver, men coercing women into sex, or just men treating women organizers as subordinated sexual playthings, the Black Panther Party and similar organizations tended not to take seriously the corrosive effects of gender violence on liberation struggle. In many ways, Elaine Brown's autobiography, A Taste of Power, A Black Woman's Story, has gone the furthest in laying bare the ugly realities of misogyny in the movement and the various ways in which both men and women reproduced and reinforced male privilege and gender violence in these organizations. Her experience as the only woman to ever lead the Black Panther Party did not exempt her from the brutal misogyny of the organization. She recounts being assaulted by various male comrades, including Huey Newton, as well as being beaten and terrorized by Eldridge Cleaver, who threatened to bury her in Algeria. And I actually read her biography this year, A Taste of Power. I highly recommend it, where she talks about all this, you know? Oh, this is interesting. Race further complicates the ways in which gender violence unfolds in our communities. In looking for common ground, relief work in post-Katrina New Orleans as an American parable of race and gender violence, Rachel Luft explores the disturbing pattern of sexual assault against white female volunteers by white male volunteers doing rebuilding work in the Upper Ninth Ward in 2006. She points out how Common Ground failed to address white men's assaults on their co-organizers and instead shifted blame to the surrounding black community, warning white women activists that they needed to be careful because New Orleans was a dangerous place. Ultimately, it proved easier to criminalize black men from the neighborhood than to acknowledge that white women and transgender organizers were most likely to be assaulted by the white men they worked with. So, yeah, the writer goes on to talk about like one of her own personal experiences of dealing with a misogynist in a group. Dismantling misogyny cannot be work that only women do. We must all do the work because the survival of our movements depends on it. Until we make radical feminist and queer political ethics that directly challenge heteropatriarchal norms or forms of organizing central to our political practice, radical movements will continue to be devastated by the antics of Brandon Darby's and folks who aren't informants but just act like them. The last bit, let's see here. When we allow women and queer organizers to leave activist space and to protect people whose violence provoked their departure, we are saying that we value these de facto state agents who disrupt the work more than we value people whose labor builds and sustains movements. As angry as gender violence on the left makes me, I am hopeful. I believe we have the capacity to change and create more justice in our movements. We don't have to start witch hunts to reveal misogynists and informants. They out themselves every time they refuse to apologize, take ownership of their actions, start conflicts, and refuse to work them out through consensus, mistreat their compañeros. We don't have to look for them, but when we are presented with their destructive behaviors, we have to hold them accountable. Our strategies don't have to be punitive. People are entitled to their mistakes, but we should expect that people will own those actions and not allow them to become a pattern. We have a right to be angry when the communities we build that are supposed to be the model for a better, more just world harbor the same kinds of anti-queer, anti-woman, racist violence that pervades society. As radical organizers, we must hold each other accountable and not enable misogynists to assert so much power in these spaces, not allow them to be the faces, voices, and leaders of these movements, not allow them to rape a compañera and then be on the fucking 5 o'clock news. In Brandon Darby's case, even if no one suspected he was an informant, his domineering and macho behavior should have been all that was needed to call his leadership into question. By not allowing misogyny to take root in our communities and movements, we not only protect ourselves from the efforts of the state to destroy our work, but also create stronger movements that cannot be destroyed from within. And then on the back, there's a link to this, how you can print it out and like distribute the zine yourself, because I think I got it in some sort of context like that. I also have a zine that I will do another day called Security Culture, a handbook for activists. I did a video years back on security culture, and consequently, like, this year was a really bad year in terms of like my experiences with security culture, and I have to own the fact that I've been like way too tolerant and like too available in a lot of ways, for part of the reason why like this has been a problem this year. So yeah, this is a good work. We will look at it in the future. If you liked looking through these zines and talking about these ideas, stay tuned for that, because this is really important information, and we've got a lot of stuff highlighted in here. Yeah, because it's it's quite important information. You don't want to end up like I did this year and like just totally fucked with from left and right, and like paranoid. Well, it's like responding to Kiki. Like, I think, yeah, what you say is right. A lot of the time, people are just there to socialize, and for dudes, that means like, finding your bros and finding like chicks to fuck. Like, that's it. Like, that's what it's about. There's no higher purpose. And like, I've seen that with all kinds of activist group. Like, the moment it becomes a social fucking event, like, get the fuck out of there. Like, it should never devolve into that. If that's what's happening, then you're not like doing work. So yeah, wow, 2 hours. I'm shocked, but there was a lot to get through here. I didn't expect to be on that long, but I get into these zines and it's enjoyable to like take them open again and kind of look at the ideas. So I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight and watched these with me, and just shout out to anybody watching on catch up. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Okay, I'm heading out. I hope you all have a good weekend. I will see you soon. Bye. Yes, I'm sure I want to end my stream.